Bueno, pues vamos a proseguir.
Okay, let's start with our last presentation.
Hemos estado antes en este espacio de
Before now,
cultura que como
we were immersed in this space of culture, and as Natalia pointed out, rightly so, is not immersed in leisure, in the very spectacle, is the space for silence, for reflection, for getting to know ourselves, and for opening up new doors. And undoubtedly, many of the new creators is, well, together with us, Mr. Abderrahmane Sissako, a creator that opens up new universes that are absolutely beautiful, poetic. With a great finesse and elegance, he immerses us in new realities that change the way we see the world, we see and understand the world. So the Camus's sentence, living is not resigning, not rejecting. So his work goes on that land, and that is why we feel so honored to receive him on these Trobades. You have the floor.
Je dois faire quoi?
What should I do? What am I expected to do?
Merci.
Good.
Merci,
First of all, thank you for the introduction. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to, well, discover these Trobades. I would like to start by thanking Mr. Mauritanian. He's been the trigger for my wish, my desire to be with you. He raised that interest in me, and obviously he did a perfectly good job, because here we are. So we met in Mauritania, and I'm here today. So this is a good proof. This shows how, well, trivial encounters can become fundamental turning points. So I would like to also thank Sandra Munak for so smartly convincing me and accompanying me until this very moment in a very subtle way and conscious way. So thanks for making everything possible. So I can only feel gratitude to you, and also thanks for the work you do in these Trobades. So my position today is not, well, I don't feel comfortable. So I'm not a natural speaker, and that is not part of my everyday work. So I believe the most important thing, or the main lesson I will learn, and the main message I'll take with me today is listening to all speakers in the morning. I learned a lot from them. So at this very moment, I'm in complete silence. So when we learn most when we are silent and listening to others. So you are giving me the word. I'm thinking of a saying that says, there's a proverb, when be merciful of those that are listening to you. So I do not envy you. You have the hardest part, the hardest role to play today as listener. What has been said this morning is so absolutely beautiful. Camus's thoughts, those ideas that liberate me, that free me, in the sense that it's not a matter of talking, of speaking, or taking the floor. What is fundamental is acting. Action becomes the key fact, not only from the point of view of creation. I'm a creator. I was born and grew in Africa. I belong to the orality tradition. I come from this tradition, and it is not a synonym for eloquency, but just orality. I was born in a place, I mean, I grew in Mali. I was born in Mauritania, but I grew in Mali. So very quickly, I became aware. I was also this morning, we spoke about awareness, being aware. So, about what is going on. The lady mayor of Menorca, in the official opening, she spoke about Menorca, the island, and the collective. I come from a numerous family. We were 14 in our court, in our nuclear family, but we ended up being 25 because my father fostered, so he took on the children of his brothers, of his siblings under the same roof. We were all living together. My uncles and aunts couldn't go to school, so my father took upon them. And he hosted or welcomed all my cousins. So we took turns to use beds. There wasn't enough place for all of us for sleeping at the same time. So the culture of sharing was, part of our DNA. When I create just for sharing with others, this is the main drive. The main driving force when creating. So we have the need to create, of doing new things, and once we grow, or in my case, I grew in a climate of inequity, of inequalities, injustices, different types of injustices. So we are, dominated by others, by other forces, and not much is shared, to be honest. And things need to find a balance. I made a film called Bamako. And why Bamako?
Imaginez qui se passe dans la cour de mon père, où j'ai fait venir.
And I try to teach and show what happens at the playing ground in my parents' house. So I invited, judges. There was a trial with witnesses that were the public, unemployed people. There were different. The public, the attendance was very diverse. So I did art to make up an impossible trial. Right now, it's not impossible to judge or to go to start a legal action, for instance, against the World Bank. This is utterly impossible. No state, no entity, no institution can go against those great forces, and we also can't go against a system that has been imposed on us, on countries such as mine, systems that are imposed by the World Bank. So we are forced to live on that, and I could summarize that by saying that the state doesn't play its role of guarantor of culture. So cinemas, theaters are closed down. They do not take upon that challenge or that function or role. They do not care at all about culture. So I remember that when I was little, we were about 70 to 80 people in the same classroom, because the state has continuously neglected the importance of education. Education is not publicly supported. This institutional intervention leads to impoverishing peoples. But however, we cannot go against that imposition. We cannot revolt or rebel against the World Bank. So in the face of those inequities, I invented this institution. And that is the role to be played by art, in my opinion. So if we cannot change things, at least we need to be aware, fully aware about inequalities. And we've consistently read that on Camus' works. Think so, you know, doing Bamako, doing that film was a way to demonstrate we are at least aware of where we are and why this new situation has been created. And it was, well, shooting this film was a very important moment for me. I was invited to Washington for a premiere of my film, for a first screening. I didn't go, I didn't attend, I didn't respond to the invitation made by the World Bank. I didn't do so because I thought that I would be, you know, in front of economists and other experts that would place me on a paradox, in a kind of paradox. And also because this, I mean, I don't necessarily need to be right, you know. I'm not the one to be right and the others to be wrong. I don't see that, you know, absolute dichotomy. So I just decided to create that film and show this reality to the world. I come from a tradition of orality. I didn't read much. I haven't read nor written much. And within my family, I lived together with my relatives in a tribe environment where we exchange a lot. We are naturally curious and interested in knowing from others. So whereas in the Western world, people tend to ignore identities. We neglect others' identities, this otherness. So that I'm speaking about Africa, but Africa doesn't speak much about itself, or it's not heard about, because the prevailing thinking systems led us in other paths. And this way, I mean, this only leads to impoverishment. We are impoverishing our cultures. We are living in a world that designs anew all the time. Everything is really fast. This momentum prevents us from sitting down to listen in silence. This development of artificial intelligence that is continuously financed, but we should rather fund in human intelligence so as to find a balance, as the presenter Mauritanian pointed out this morning. So we tend to use intellectual positions from a point of view of we tend to blame others, blame Europe or others, but I'm not here to put the blame on anybody or anything. I'm here to discuss freely with all of you. I'm African, but I uphold values that could be considered as universal as an artist. My duty, my obligation is to give voice to those that are not there, that are not visible, or people that are not aware of what is going on around them, because somehow they are blindfolded without noticing it. So we need to, not shout, but without shouting, without being violent, we need to, raise the awareness through creation, providing visibility to realities. So from the position of whispering, not shouting, not crying, we should express through art to reveal new realities. And I chose visual arts, cinema. That's why I became a filmmaker. I wanted to revolt, to rebel. And yes, Bamako was against the World Bank, but I created other films that deal with other topics, different topics. That is essential, at least to me. Aimé Césaire is an author that is very much present to me. He said that the great tragedy of Africa is not they didn't contact late with the rest of the world, but the problem lies in the way they contact with the rest of the world. Europe is in the hands of, the prevailing powers, banks, financial entities. So Europe is mainly focused on, on generating profit, and this led to many deaths and tragedies. So whenever we read those sentences, we need to say them aloud and insist on them, because we've been colonized, impoverished, slaved. We became slaves and, subject. We are, and political systems are enjoying and taking advantage of this situation of slavery. So this natural reflection of dominating others, from taking what belongs to others, impoverishing, so that others gradually, become the slaves or those fireballs that become so violent. So the real risk, that's the real risk, or the real threat we are facing as the whole mankind. So instead of avoiding, in front of this lack of understanding, people choose to create walls, barriers, all those walls that are being built nowadays to separate those that are powers that do not own anything, those that swim and embark on small boats in search for paradise, for a way to avoid misery and poverty. That tragedy, there is no culture that can evolve by creating physical barriers. Of course, you will be protected for a while, for some times, but ultimately it will be useless, utterly useless. So we need to really do the job of sharing in this reality. Otherwise, we will culture, education will be a benefit only to some, to the richest ones.
Ces priorités, qu'on voit tous les jours.
So we need to leave behind impunity, those prevailing values. Countries are spending more and more money on buying weapons, new arms. So the so-called civilization, those countries that consider themselves as civilized, but we've been, kidnapped by capital, by capitalism. It's a cancer that neutralizes everything that is killing us gradually. So, truly, we don't know. Some of us do not know how to react to this new, environment.
So in fact, everything is, there's a link and a bond and in a symbiosis with what has been said this morning. And I feel
Moi, je fais aujourd'hui, je vis de deux façons. Une fois, c'est quand je travaille,
well,
quand je fais un
satisfied
film,
by this because I
quand
live
je
in
fais
two
un
ways.
opéra, il y a un
When
lien
I work, when I'm
avec
doing
ceux
a
qui me
film
font confiance
or
en tant que partenaire,
a
donc je fais des
project
choses,
with
mais
the
quand-
partners that
quand
trust
je
me.
fais pas ça,
And when I'm
et
not working
depuis quelques années,
for already a few years,
en Mauritanie, qui est un
in
pays du désert que vous
Mauritania,
connaissez,
a country of the
et
desert
je suis
that you
mobilisé, je me
know,
mobilise avec,
well,
avec
there
ma femme, mais aussi avec
I'm
quelques personnes qui sont
an
sensibles à ça.
activist, also
Et
with
nous protégeons,
my wife and
et
other
100
people
hectares,
sensitive to this, and we are
d'acacias
protected
qui étaient en
100
danger, qui étaient
hectares
coupés pour faire
of
du charbon, par
trees
exemple, parce que pauvre
that
aussi,
had been cut down
notre réflexe est de
to
protéger ce
do
lieu,
coal,
c'est de protéger ces arbres,
and we want to protect
c'est
the
de replanter
acacias
cette forêt. C'est rare là-bas les forêts.
because
Replanter,
we
de
want
faire
to
quelque chose, de
protect
faire
these
une action, de faire pousser
forests,
les choses.
to
Donc,
do
c'est
an
vraiment dans
action,
l'action
to make
qu'on
things
peut
change.
Et
And this
faire un
is through
don.
action
Il
that
a
we
été
can
dit aussi,
actually give
on a parlé de dons, et
a gift.
Franck, voilà, que je ne connaissais pas.
And
Là,
we've been talking about that this morning, and Frank is someone that I didn't know before, and he talked about this concept of the gift of giving and receiving. For me, these are extremely important values, and I am more and more aware of that, of those values. I understand also that this work is extremely difficult because there's an enormous ignorance, nearly completely ignorance from the politicians and also the partners from Europe and other people outside who are saying that they are sensitive to this. They fill their discourses talking about the environment, but when we're talking about specific projects that are protecting a forest on the basis of volunteer work, and when we try to do this kind of thing, real action in the field, then the silence we get from our calls for help is terrible. So this is very discouraging, but and Camus talked about being crazy, that you need to be crazy to do things. And I think that's true. You need to be crazy, truly crazy, to once again actually get engaged and to do things, even when we're facing this indifference, and also facing the lies that exist in the form of cooperation, but it's limited to thought. It's just not possible, because these cooperations, they don't trust the people, don't trust individuals. They only trust the system, the politicians. But sharing with others to change the world, they don't do that. And it's true despair doing this. But of course, consciousness is the most important thing, to be aware of this, to be able to change through action, whatever the form of the action. So this is why I'm saying that what we're doing here is an action, a true action, a specific concrete action, to give the floor to people, to give the voice to people, and also to listen. We're not very many here, but it is already extraordinary, because people who are here attending this event will go back home, and they will keep this fire, this flame alive, and this conviction, sharing this conviction that art, poetry, and culture must be installed in people, and from there on we won't let anything go, let anything down. Thank you.
Muchas gracias por este discurso tan lúcido.
Thank you very much for this very clairvoyant speech. Today, very lucid speech. Today, our mayor said that the climate crisis is very active. I don't dare speak French.
Ok. Je vais le faire. Trois. Donc je crois que c'est... Ok, merci. Non. Oui. Oui.
Buenos días. ¿Me escucha?
Good morning. Can you hear me now?
No, que está... He empezado
So I was saying that,
dando un elogio
well,
a su
first of all, saying that your speech, your discourse was very, was a magnificent word, splendid. It was very clear and clairvoyant, and your speech should be disseminated. And then I said that this morning our mayor said that the climate crisis was unstoppable. Then Mr. Moratinos referred to the crisis in the world, then the planet, and then Agnès referred to the crisis, also the disaster, the climate disaster. So can we allow ourselves to be afraid? Are you afraid, Mr. Sissako? Well, I think that one of the things I wish for everyone, and that I wish for my children too, is never to be afraid, never to feel fear, because this is a terrible feeling. It is a feeling that we should avoid. Should avoid feeling afraid. When we are afraid, when we are under, we're feeling fear, we won't even be able to shout for help. And why do I say this? Because very recently I worked on an opera, Le Vol du Voli. And when I was asked to work on an opera, it was on the basis of an idea of Damon Alvar, a British composer, and there in Le Chapelet I was asked to prepare an opera. And I told them two things. First of all, that I had never seen an opera myself, and secondly, that I've never been to an opera theatre. So that I would do it nevertheless, because I wasn't afraid of doing it, and because I believe that this is a chance. It also shows that they trust me to propose such a thing for me in such a theatre like Le Châtelet, so such an important theatre. And secondly, I thought that I would bring, I said there was also a condition that I would bring Africa to this theatre. So for me, it would be an opera that I would create where Africa would exist within this theatre. And the director of the theatre who was there, I said something to her. I said, I'm going to bring Samba Diallo on stage. And she asked me, who is Samba Diallo? I don't know him. And she thought it might be a great singer or a great actor. And I said, no, Samba Diallo is the guardian of your theatre. And she asked me if I knew him from before, and I said, no, I just said hello and asked him what his name was. And she, the director, sees this guard every day at work and didn't even know what his name was. So that's what I told her, that I was going to bring Samba Diallo to the stage in the sense of anonymity. So I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid in my work, and I'm also someone with concerns. Because I see that lies dominate, that the true force that dominates everything is lies. Everything is done for deceiving. We've referred to the media this morning. But we really need a leap there. And for everyone to be able to do this leap, it is essential to understand that we must not separate people. We should not create separations, gaps, in terms of money or this feeling of superiority or knowledge that exists. And for most people, we have this impression that there is we've got poor Africa and rich Europe, but that's not right. The world is not like that. There's not a poor Africa and a rich Europe. And Africa, and the reality is not that of Africa needing help, but that's what we've been told, what we have been made to believe. And the terrible drama in this continent is that Africa is not poor. They're the victims of its wealth. So this is why I was saying that the world is not really sharing. It's true that when we see what's going on nowadays, precisely around with regards to the environment, I mentioned the example of this small forest of acacias. And this is really a lot in a country such as mine. But when we see that those who go to school, those who have the means, who have the decision-making power, who have the power, they do nothing to help a project such as mine. This really worries me. Yes, I am a doctor. I'm not now retired, and I am a father, and I'm scared. Whenever someone is told that he's got a diagnosis of cancer, that person always changes the way he lives. He lives his lifestyle. Why don't we understand then that the planet has cancer and that we need to change our lifestyle so that we can heal the planet and ourselves? Thank you. I don't really know how to answer your question. I don't know how to answer to this question in an intellectual way. I don't really know what to say about this. I think that little by little everything is done to transform humankind. And going back to Camus and talking about happiness, when we defined happiness, well, we'll never have it. But we've created images, shapes, everything to have a definition of happiness. So Zara, HLM, all this conditioning, right? But we need to change the way we look at things. I am advocating for Africa because I live there. And for me, it's a symbol. We need to change the way we look at this continent. It's not a whole continent wanting to flee. No, people live there, people struggle there, they are happy there, they are sad there. The energy is there, and there's an incredible vital life energy there. And there's a true sharing of groups and communities. And it's an enormous reality with an enormous energy, but it's completely ignored. We even think that if Africans go to Europe, they are considered not a source of wealth, but a danger. And that's terrible, because exchange will always be beneficial. I'm not talking about opening the borders. I'm talking about the way we look to the other person, or the way we look to the others.
Buenos días, Abderrahmane, el traductor. Lo primero agradecer cuando comenzaste tu exposición, para mí fue muy revelador.
Intervention. And at the beginning, well, I'd like to say that I really liked the way you were invited to accept this invitation in a subtle and a smart way. This was also important for me because I understand that thanking can be expressed in many different ways. And also it's even more important for me when you mentioned that you said no to the invitation to go and talk to the people in the World Bank. I've got many things in my mind right now after we've been hearing today up to now, but there's one word that no one mentioned yet, and that is the word privilege. And hearing you talk, this makes me think about our privilege as a European society, but we have not yet talked about this, about the privilege we have, because when you're privileged, it's difficult to acknowledge yourself as privileged, and also being responsible of this privilege. I've been living in Latin America, and thank you for what you said, because you said there's nothing to do against the policies of the World Bank, and then that made me automatically think about the privilege and how, for us, we are accomplices of this, the World Bank and their policies with our silence, and from our privilege we allow ourselves not to be constantly active in questioning their policies everywhere, wherever we have the opportunity to discuss the injustice of those policies, particularly when the IMF acknowledges that their own policies, programs and recipes are failing. And we are accomplices from our position of privilege. That was a bit of the thought I wanted to share with you. And then, not perhaps for you, but also for the whole audience, perhaps we have some sort of shield. It's not the barriers, Frontex and everything you mentioned, but also there's a sort of a mental wall that makes us believe that what happens somewhere else will never reach us in a different country. The war, well, we've see that now. And when I came back from Latin America, where I had been living during several years, where there were popular movements going on, and here the word populism has been used a lot for that, and the way populism is understood. And in fact, that there have been many struggles to change narratives also with regards to the funds, the vulture funds, and there have been many struggles to make people understand that vulture funds can end up destroying a country. And, well, we've referred to critical media, and I think that in general media don't go in those lines. We should think also about this issue of not receiving any news from other continents. And thank you so much for bringing all those topics to us so that we can discuss about this and we can think about these issues. Also, you made me think about this idea of joy and being positive. This should be also important in politics. Someone in politics should have a positive attitude or be optimistic, like you do in your creation. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. I have a question. Don't you think it was a mistake not taking profit of this opportunity to show your films to the World Bank? Perhaps with your talent as a filmmaker, you could have changed the way economists see the world? No, I did show my film there, but I didn't go. The film was shown, but I didn't go there because I did not want to participate in a discussion with the economists. That was not the goal.
Hi. Just want to thank you so much for your talk. I completely agree with you on so many points. Africa is rich with so many things, resources, art, and knowledge from the indigenous people of the continent. And I think it's very important to highlight the narratives that are from the insider perspectives in order to break the otherness and the exotic narratives about the continent that has been told from outside perspectives. My question to you as an artist and as an advocate, in the context of taking and giving, how do you create a balance?
Bon, c'est difficile. Ouais.
Well, that's a difficult question.
Je pense qu'il faut.
I think that
il faut faire des choses comme ces rencontres-là, je pense.
We need to do these kind of events, these kind of meetings, and multiply them so that they are also in-person meetings, so that people can doubt together, hesitate together, so that they can think about the future together.
L'énergie d'être optimiste.
And also the energy of being optimism. Optimism for me is absolutely fundamental. Keeping hope, being optimistic, because if we're optimistic, we can build things even in poverty. A poor family that is not optimistic will not be able to educate their children, and I think that's the case all over the world. We must not resign, we must not despair.
Hello. Thank you so much for your work. I want to start by saying that Waiting for Happiness came to me at a very fundamental moment of my life and really influenced the way that I make films. I want to touch on what you said about oral histories, right? Oral recollections. Being Nigerian, it is also the way that we recollect our histories. which is beautiful and problematic in itself, because in those recollections, things can get lost. There is no archival system that really works in Nigeria, and we rely on things being passed down orally to generations. I'm wondering, in your works, how do you play with fact and fiction? How do you make a dance between fact and fiction?
Comment? Alors, je vais commencer à expliquer un peu que.
Okay, I'll start by explaining or letting you know that the way I work, I do films. In my creative work, there is an important factor for, well, not only for me, but for any artists. That is being close, searching for topics, around you, not being aloof and not being far away. This is the only way of being universal. Universality is exactly that, finding your topics, your interests around you. Just not, telling yourselves stories, creating characters in the films you shoot. Telling those stories because they have a value. They value those people around me. So those characters, treasure and cherish certain values. And that is what I always have in mind when shooting or when creating my scripts. And other characters are similar to me because of their frailty, and this is essential, working on this way. We need to know where we come from. And when I did the test to access the film festival in Moscow, I was 17 years old, so I took that exam. I wasn't ready and I wasn't prepared in that sense. In the Western sense of the word, to be a filmmaker, you need to have a lot of culture. You need to be really, maybe I should have known Picasso, Tchaikovsky, or Van Gogh, those benchmarks, those cultural references. And you need to prove you know them to be accepted as a filmmaker. And I had no idea. I was completely unaware about those figures, who was Van Gogh or Picasso. I had never listened to Mozart or Tchaikovsky, but I was fully convinced of something. And that is my culture, my identity, my cultural identity includes a certain music and can be as universal as Mozart's works or pieces. So I mention and I say we need to change the way we look at Africa, or the way that we understand Africa is exactly because of this. It's, like a whole, a totality. And I was convinced I had something to express, even though I didn't know how at that time. So if I didn't know those world-renowned painters, it didn't mind, because I grew up on a courtyard where women put their clothes to dry up, and I had the knowledge of how hues and colors of those sheets change over the day as the sun rose and set, and that made sense to me when I was a child. Many things happened in my environment, and we need to treasure and to value those moments because they, because of they have that merit, because of what they are worth. So there are many present values. So they are the 5 greatest capitals in the world: Paris, London, or New York and Beijing, some people think that the world is defined as such, and it's imposed on it. And we are feeding and educating our children to believe that this is the universal truth. They do not grow by cherishing their values. I'm a Spanish boy, I'm a Dutch guy, but Burkina Faso has its own values. The same goes for Rwanda and many other places. And of course, there are many commonalities, many things to learn and to exchange and to share. I learned a lot in Moscow when I spent on my stay in Russia. I went to ballet and I learned a lot, an enormous amount of things. So I learned, I studied with another person that didn't, my roommate didn't expect anything at all from me. Or he thought that I had nothing to teach him. That is the real poverty, the real cultural poverty of mankind. I don't know whether I'm replying exactly to your question. I'm sorry if I'm, deriving a bit much, so getting lost. But this is the best way to me to define wealth or being rich. So being rich, no matter where you come from. So we all need to feel useful because we all have a lot to give and to provide. That is an absolute condition to change things for the better.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci.
Thank you very much.
Merci.
Again, thanks.
Merci.
Merci énormément, Abderrahmane.
We're enormously grateful to you, Abderrahmane, because once again you showed that you can revel in silence without shouting, in a wise and subtle and sweet way. Thanks for your words today. So now we're going for lunch. And we'll be back at 4, please, if possible, some minutes before 4, 5 to 4, so that we can start at 4 sharp with Laura Fernandez and Antonio Molina. See you in a while.